We've got as it is, so it's not a big deal. Oh, that. Okay. Let's start that one too. Okay, yeah, guys. So we're gonna be doing some variance past paper questions today. Okay, Joshua. Hey, afternoon, Joshua. How you doing? Good to have you on. Okay, cool. Okay, so I think I'm ready to start now. All right, so once again, good afternoon. Thanks for your patience. Like I said, I could go a bit past 6 o'clock to make sure we get the 2 hours. Because I know next week we do have class twice a week, twice next week. We have class on the Tuesday and the Thursday. Right, so that's here, 22nd and the 24th, sorry. And I would like to, if we can't have class on the 29th, I will buy the bullet and put class on Saturday morning as per usual. Because next week I want to start and hopefully finish investment appraisal, right? I was talking about having the crash course this week in all of these sessions here. But the funny part is, and somebody actually paid for the whole thing already, although I didn't confirm it. Because I may actually have to put my form 5 crash course people on some extra days and then just give you all 3 days here, but 2 sessions per day, which is 6 sessions. Right, but we'll see if you could do that anyway. Because I don't know what you guys have planned into the other lessons or whatever the case is, right? Because I don't want to leave you high and dry, like here, like the last class being that Saturday and then a full 2 weeks of just no contact. I don't like that. But again, because Caribbean is here, communication is here, and the maths exam for CSEC is there, it's difficult, it's not impossible to find days and times to put you on. But let me ponder on it this weekend if I get some time. Anyhow, I think that's enough of that. So let's try and make as much use of today as possible. All right, so let's go back here. Oh, here's Shekinah. Cool. Hey, good afternoon, Shekinah. How you doing? Good to have you on. Just about to start there, so you didn't miss anything. Okay, so last day we were here, we were looking at the overhead variances. So we had 3, right? We had the overhead spending variance, and then the variable overhead efficiency variance, and the fixed overhead volume variance, right? So this one was like the price variance, and it was based on actual, oops, sorry, just now. It should come back in just now. If not, I know what I'll do. It does this whenever, for some reason, it's only with your one it happens, I think. No, I like the math class too. The math class I'll have to use, yeah. Yeah, I think something wrong with the connectors and the pins in that particular section there, so I'll have to switch to that. Anyhow, yeah, and these two are the efficiency efficiency or usage variances, yeah. This is materials, usage, and labor efficiency variance, right? And we have one for variable and one for fixed overheads, right? And the selling price. Okay, that's enough of that. Give me one sec, guys. I have to, that's gonna annoy me. Sort it out. Just jack it in with the actual HDMI code. Right, it should pop up now, right, and it shouldn't do that anymore. But it's also not charging, so that's not a good thing. Right. My battery full. It should be able to last the full 2 hours. So yeah. Okay. Right. So when we took a look at it, right, we have actual, and then the selling price here. So we had to split the actual into fixed and variable. The kind of trick there was that the item in green, the budgeted fixed factory overhead was usually the actual fixed factory overhead, because fixed overhead doesn't vary with the level of output. So whatever your budget is usually known beforehand and you usually stick to it, right? Usually, right? For the variable, so what we did was simply subtract the budgeted fixed from the actual, and that would give us the variable actually incurred, right? And then across here now, for the middle piece, we pulled out the fixed item and the variable. So we would take the OAR, which was given to us in the question, usually the $7 here, and we multiplied it by the actual volume of the cost driver. And in this question, the yellow Sanko applies overheads to products on the basis of what you call it, direct labor hours. Okay, cool. So we multiply the $7 by the 4,100 labor hours actually incurred, right? Yeah, hold on. Yeah, actual quantity. Yeah, actual quantity of the DLH, right? Sorry. Okay, it didn't thing off, so I'm okay with that. Right. So we then got the 28.7 added to the 40, giving us 68.7. So we were able to get that piece there. Cool. So that was the spending variance, the difference in the actual amount spent on overhead and the amount we should have spent. But as you could see, the real difference there lay in the variable. All right. And as we know, with materials and labor, we actually usually have a price per unit, per kilogram, per pound, whatever it is for materials, and a price per hour for direct labor. For overheads, how do we pay for overheads? Well, we break it down into a price, which is the OAR, right? And as per the question, we had a variable OAR. Yeah, we had a variable OAR and a different fixed OAR, right? And of course, it had to be mindful of what the actual cost driver was, right? Filling any car? Oh, geez. All right. Well, yeah, you gotta go far. That's cool. Stuff to work. Patterns? Yeah. Right. Okay, cool. You have things to? Yeah, why not? Yeah, guys, sorry, I have multiple classes going on at the same time. One inside, one outside with me. So, yeah, bear with me. Right, so for the efficiency variances now, right? So this is where we took, so the same item we've solved for here, right? It's just gonna come down here, right? But this piece across here, right? So that was standard quantity and standard price. So the standard price was the same as the item across here. Standard quantity would be the quantity of the cost driver that should have been used. So again, you have to familiarize yourself with the question. You have to look for the actual quantity of output and the standard, right? So for the overheads, it tends to be a bit more involved, a bit trickier, right? So what we're gonna do, we're gonna start with our overheads one. Should we start with the overheads one, boy? I have one here with so I have here materials variances, labor variances, and overhead. Good. Let me stick to the plan. The plan is deal with this variance first, and then we'll deal with the other. Right? Okay, cool. So here what we'll do. We'll do this item as a kind of example, right? So this is rolling hills, right? E2512. This is a question from the old UE text that I normally use to teach you guys stuff, right? Okay. So the city of okay, that's not what I want to do at all, right? The city of Rolling Hills employs a standard cost system for its park operations. Standard costing is what we're doing. The following standards have been established for the monthly maintenance of 1 acre of developed land. Okay, cool. So we have direct materials, 1 pound of chemicals, $10. Direct labor, 10 hours at $10 per hour, that gives us 100. Right? This is per acre, right? Variable overhead, right? So 10 hours at $8 per hour. So the $8 per hour is clearly the variable OAR, right? And fixed overhead is again 10 hours. So as you can see, the 10 hours is a kind of a commonality between the direct labor and the variable and fixed overhead. but there's a different OAR for the fixed overhead. Okay, cool. So again, this is like the selling price for variable overheads, and this is the selling price for fixed overheads, right? And clearly we are using direct labor as the cost driver for the overheads. Okay, I don't know how I keep getting that kind of weird rhombus. It's not a rhombus, it's a trapezium thing, right? So direct labor is the cost driver. Okay, so the budgeted annual fixed overhead of 42,000 is spread evenly throughout the year. So what did we learn about the budgeted overhead from before? We said budgeted overhead is usually going to end up being actual, budgeted fixed overhead, sorry, is usually going to end up being actual as well. Because again, fixed overheads don't vary with the level of output or activity. They stay fixed within the relevant range. And usually the budgeted figure is known, right? The fixed overheads are known beforehand. So budgeted usually tends to equal actual as well, right? And actual results for August, right? So that's interesting. It's just August they're talking about here. And this here is said to spread evenly throughout the year. So what that means is per month, you'll take $42,000 divide by 12, which is going to give us, I think, $3,500 per month for fixed overhead. Yeah, sorry, that's something with the connector. You keep kind of slipping. Anyhow, right. So total overhead incurred 15,400. Labor hours worked 1150 labor hours, and land maintained 100 acres. Because remember, this here is the cost for 1 acre, right? So we could scale it up by 100 to find for 100 acres, right? So determine the city's spending variance, variable overhead efficiency variance, and fixed overhead volume variance. Be sure to label the variance as favorable or unfavorable. Okay, cool. Props. All right. So first thing we want to do is let's get a bead on the let's set up our kind of grid approach, right? So we have actual quantity multiplied by actual price, right? The middle one will be actual quantity by standard price. So we're trying to kind of impose on the overhead variances the same kind of pattern and procedure we use with the labor and materials variances. Right. Right. Now, for actual quantity by actual price, right? That's the stuff. You know what? I mean, yeah. So actual is for August, right? So it's these things here. All right. So it says total overhead incurred is $15,400, right? So 15,400, right? And usually, again, what we do is we split this into fixed. Sorry, I'm trying to get an arrow going on there. Wow, I don't know why it's not. Right? So normally we try to split into fixed and variable. Aha, what's up? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You could do that. That's fine. Yeah. Right. So the fixed overhead, like we said, per month, because it's only for August, we're doing it as 3,500, right? Right. And then for what should you call it, the variable overhead, you subtract that from this, right? So 3,000 plus 12 and minus 1, so 11,900. 11,900 is the variable overhead actually included, right? So that's, and again, you can check it if you add it back, you get the same 15,400, right? Okay, so I know it's only 7 ago, but that's okay. People have things to do. So, ladies and gents, if you guys good with that, just kind of give me a quick genie chat, please. And if you need me to recap anything, everything, give me an R and tell me what you want me to recap. Okay, cool. 5 out of 7. Next two, let me know when you get a chance, please. And please recap additions. All right, give me a sec. Give me a sec. Now, for the actual quantity by standard price, what are we talking about in terms of actual quantity? All right. Now, again, for the term in the middle, right, this item in the middle here, we're looking at what we should have spent on overheads, right? So again, we are going to split it into fixed and variable. Okay, the arrow is not cooperating with me today. Fixed, variable. So we said the budgeted annual fixed overhead is known beforehand and is spread evenly throughout the year, and usually will be the actual overhead incurred. All right. Oh, nice. That or keep features because this is keep stuff, right? So this one is the same 3,500, right? The variable overhead that should have been incurred would be the OAR, right? As the selling price, right? Right. By the direct labor hours, right? So it was 1150 direct labor hours multiplied by 8. That is the OER for the variable. All right. So that's 3,500 plus. All right. So 8,800 to 9,002. Right. And that's going to give us 12,700. Right, so let me just recap that. So again, for the item in the middle, right, the total overheads, the value of that overhead should have been for the actual quantity of output, right? So the fixed overheads remain the same because again, fixed overheads don't vary with the level of output, right? If they do, the question will tell you. The variable overhead is what we had to work. So how much variable overhead should we have incurred? So again, variable overheads are applied based on direct labor hours, all right? The rate, as they gave us in the question here, is $8 per direct labor hour. And then down here, they gave us, sorry, that thing is annoying me now. Okay, cool. So yeah, I'll unplug that for now. George will still be seeing stuff. Okay, cool. I'll plug it back in a bit, so hopefully it wouldn't keep making that noise. It's annoying. Right. Right. So we had to multiply the actual quantity of the direct labor hours as the cost driver by the selling price. Sorry, the standard price. Right. So 1150 multiplied by 8. Right. That gave us 9,200, and we added that to the 3,500, got 12,007. So now we're comparing these two things here. So it looks like we spent more than we should have, right? Right. So when we compare 15, sorry, who's that? Hey, good afternoon, Vedika. How are you doing? Good to see you on. Right. It's the first question we're doing. There's another overheads question. So we're just taking our time to go through it as an example because we have more questions to do. Right. So we have 15,400, right? Actual versus 12,007, which is what it was supposed to cost. So therefore, since we spent more than we should have, we know we're going to have an unfavorable variance, and the difference between these two is 2,700. Unfavorable. Cool. All right. So this all right. So you guys already talked. I already asked you guys about this stuff so far. So I'm asking now about the stuff. Shekinah, very good. Yes. So I'm asking about the green. If you guys are good with the green and then the subsequent calculation down, it's gonna be a quick genie job. If you need me to go over the green, it's not a problem. Let me know. Right, give me an R. However, you're good with the stuff, then that's great. Let me know and we'll proceed. All right, lovely. All right, cool. So check what we're gonna do now. I'm gonna shift this across a little bit. Right. Oh yeah, no problem. That's fine. I was having some issues technically earlier too. Yeah, the camera, you all see me here, like it was freezing and looking real fuzzy and stuff. So eventually I changed the connecting cable. That's to declare it up. So clearly the cable had a short. I mean, it's about a year old, so things have a limited life. Some things, well, everything. Anyhow, okay, so now, so that there is the overhead spending variance, right? Let me label it. Right, so this is the overhead spending variance. Now we need the variable overhead efficiency variance and the fixed overhead volume variance. So we know that that goes on the side with the blue. So I'm gonna do something different here, right? Now on the previous day, right, we saw I kind of worked it twice, right? What we noticed is that the selling price is the OAR, right? And what we are basically comparing is the actual quantity of the cost driver, labor hours in this case, with the standard quantity of labor hours, right? The cost driver. So in this case, follow me for a second, right? Let's consider from the variable perspective, right? So from the variable perspective, right? We had the so let's stick with quantity first, right? So what is quantity? Quantity is labor hours. Okay. Now we maintained 100 labor hours, and we're supposed to take 10 hours per acre, right? Sorry, I said labor hours is 100 acres and it's 10 hours per acre. So in all, right? So that's 10 by 100. So that's 1,000 direct labor hours, and the standard price as per day is 8, right? So that should give us $8,000 for that item there, right? And now what we're going to do, we're going to compare that to this, because that figure, 9,200, was the actual quantity of labor hours, the 1150 on top here, multiplied by the same $8, which is the OAR, right? So as we can clearly see, right? So we're doing 92. Sorry, 1 second. I'd like to put a dollar sign. We have 9,200 versus 8,000. Right. So clearly we spent more than we were supposed to. Right. So that's equal to a 1,200 unfavorable variance. All right. So I'm going to recap it real quick. What we are trying to find here is the variable overhead efficiency variance. Right. So that's a usage or it's a usage variance and efficiency variance, right? Now, as we know, that uses these two things here, right? Now, we already have this item here. So what we want is standard quantity by standard price. Now, standard price, again, because it's the variable overhead efficiency variance, we are using variable overhead OAR, variable OAR, which is 8 as the price, the selling price, right? Standard price, sorry, not selling price. Standard quantity is what, right? Well, the standard quantity of the cost driver. What is the cost driver? The cost driver is direct labor. Okay, cool. Now we are using 10 hours of direct labor per 1 acre of land, right? Right. I'm trying to erase this thing here. Right. And the actual number of acres maintained in August was 100. So we so for 100 acres at 10 hours per acre, we would have used 1,000 direct labor hours in total. And when you multiply the standard quantity of labor hours by the standard price, we get $8,000. When we compare that to the standard price for the actual quantity, we get an unfavorable variance. All right. So again, I know I just asked, but asking again because I want to make sure we. Can I get a G if you guys okay with that particular piece, please? Okay. If you need me to re-explain, I'll do it again. It's not a problem. Shekinah. All right, cool, no problems. Right, so Shekinah, what we're trying to find here is the variable overhead efficiency variance, right? Efficiency or I guess usage variance. So what we are comparing is this piece here with this piece here for variable overheads, right? Now the item in the green we did before, but I'll recap it nonetheless, right? That's cleared up, right? Right. So we're looking at actual quantity by standard price and standard quantity by standard price. So it's really this is what we're looking at, right? Cool. Now the standard price for the variable overheads is the variable overhead rate, the variable OAR, right? Which the question gave us as $8, right? And then if we go down to, let me put a different highlight color. If we go down to here, right? Actual results for August with total overhead incurred that, labor hours with that, and land maintained 100 acres, right? Okay. So now we could see across here in the orange, right, that we actually worked 1150 hours. So that's the actual quantity of labor hours. That's the cost driver, right? We have to multiply that by the standard price, which is the variable OAR, which is 8, which the question gave us, right? And 1150 by 8 is 9200, right? So Shekinah, just give me a quick G if you're good with that piece. All right, cool. One sec, I realize my head kind of blocking some stuff there. I'll just shift myself. Oh, no, 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 no. Right. And then from there now, good, thank you. Right. And now for standard quantity by standard price, right? So standard price is the same between here and here, which is the same as the variable OAR, right? What we want is the standard quantity of what? The cost driver. What's the cost driver for any overheads? Direct labor hours. Okay, cool. So the standard, right? The standard that has been established for 1 acre of land is 10 labor hours per acre, right? And the actual results for August, right, for 100 acres, right? So in August, we did 100 acres. We did 100 acres at 10 hours per acre. 100 by 10 is 1,000. That's the standard quantity of labor hours that should have been used, right? We, in fact, used 1150, right? So we could tell that we're going to have an unfavorable variance because we use more hours than we should have, right? So, sorry, yeah. So when we multiply the 10 by 100, right, which is the number of hours per acre by the actual number of acres, right? So yeah, the standard hours by the number of acres, right? We should have spent 1,000 hours, right? So that's the standard quantity. The standard price is the same variable OER of 8. 1,000 by 8 is 8,000, right? So now we have to compare 9,200 and the 8,000, right? So this is what we actually spent, is what we should have spent. So we actually spent more than we should have, which means we spent too much and therefore have an unfavorable variance. Okay, is that a little better? Good. Okay. All right. Cool. 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 All right. Okay. So now what we'll talk about is the fixed overhead volume variance, which is basically the fixed overhead version of what we just did here, right? So for the fixed overhead now, sorry, am I back to 100? Right. So for the fixed overhead, right, the standard quantity by standard price. So standard quantity, so again, what's the standard quantity? Quantity of what? Well, is because it's overheads, is the standard quantity of the cost driver, which is the same as this, right? It's labor hours, and it's 1,000 labor hours because it was 100 acres at 10 hours each. But the standard price for fixed overhead is now $4, right? So we're going to multiply 1,000 by $4 per labor hour, and that's going to give us $4,000, right? And now we have to compare that to the actual overhead, which is 3,500. Right, so we're going to compare, hold on, I have to zoom back in. Right, so we have to compare the actual of 3,500 versus the standard based on the calculations here of 4,000. So we actually spent less than we were supposed to. So that's going to give us a favorable variance. Right, so that's going to give us a $500 favorable variance. can I get a quick G if you guys are good with the orange stuff? The fixed overhead volume variance. Right, if you need me to re-explain, give me the R, is no problem, I'll do it again. Let me know. That's 4 to 7 people. So we'll see how it goes. All right. So now we have to find total overhead. Right, the total overhead variance, right? Okay, so total overhead variance. Right, so you have a 2700 unfavorable. Right, we have a 500 favorable. We have a, oh, sorry. Uh-huh. What's that? Yeah, that's a mistake. Yeah. Right, I forgot 1200 unfavorable for the blue. And 500 favorable. Right, so 27 and 12 is 39, minus 5 is 3400 unfavorable. Cool. Okay. Right, so that's the kind of recap question for the overhead variances. All right, guys. So what we're going to do now, we're going to jump into some past paper questions, right? That I pulled from some of the older papers, because the newer papers it was kind of hard to find variances in any meaningful way. And these older questions will give us information in a relatively easy to find way, right? Some of them at least. I'm going to have a multiple choice thing in the mix there just to mix things up a little bit. Right, so I skipped the next question with plenty words and I went straight to this next piece. Right, okay. Yeah, no problem. You go ahead. That's not a problem. You do your thing. All right, see you next time. So let's go to the question. What I want to do, actually, I'll send a picture of this in the chat. We will keep people. All right, so I'll send it to you guys in the chat. If it would go, that'd be great. Right. Let's take a read and see how much of this we could do. Get through. Right. So Sparrow Company's standard and actual cost per unit for the most recent period during which 400 units were produced are given below. So this here is your actual quantity of total output. That might come into play later. Okay. So materials. So you have standard to the left, actual to the right. Just now, one sec. Okay. Right. So standard is $2, 2 feet per unit at $1.50 per foot. When we compare that to 2.1 feet at 160, right? What we can see for materials, we use more and it costs more, right? So the total materials versus clearly both of them, well, technically all three are going to be unfavorable. Direct labor, however, we have a savings on time, but we have a an increase on the cost rate. Right? Variable overhead standard is 1.5 at 340. Actual is 1.4 at 310. Right? That one a little confusing. Let me just check and see what I have there. 4. Okay. Let's do one thing at a time. All right. So as you can see, they want you to find the material. So we have to find materials variances, labor variances, and overhead variances, right? We have six and how to find. So to find six, let's start with the first one. All right, so materials price variance. So again, remember, our basic setup is this, right? Um, yeah, so the basic setup is where'd it go? Right? So when you compare those two, that's your price variance. When you compare these two, that's your efficiency variance. Right? So what we'll do is we'll set it up. Okay. Right? Materials price variance. Right. So we want actual quantity by actual price versus actual quantity by standard price. That's materials. Let me see. Right. So for the actual quantity, right. So remember, you made 400 units, right? And you use 2.1 feet per unit. So the actual quantity here will be 400 units multiplied by 2.1, which will give us 840. Right? So this would therefore be, right, so 840 by actual price, which is 160. This is 840 by standard price, which is 150. So I kind of did it for you, but you could go ahead and finish it off there. Right? And what I would let you all try is the next piece, the material quantity variance. All right, so finish that one off and then try the second one. Sorry. this one, guys. So 840 by 1 point. Okay, well, I guess I had to break on my calculator. 840 by 1.6 is 1344. 840 by 1.5 is 840 and 1260. Let's make sure. Yeah. When we subtract that, we're going to get 84. And because we spent more than we should have, we actually spent more than we should have, it would be an unfavorable variance. Yes, you can. Very good. Thanks very much. All right. Now what we'll do is maybe I could do it in a slightly heavier font, right? Okay, so now let's tackle the materials quantity variance. Materials quantity variance, right? Again, hold on. These two. Comparing actual and standard quantity at the standard price. Right? So this would be actual quantity by standard price compared to standard quantity by standard price. Right? So again, the actual quantity we have already as 840. But what would the standard quantity be? So if it was 400 units at 2 feet, 400 by 2 is 800. All right? Right, so this would have been the same 840. Sorry, I don't know where I got that point from. 840 by 1.6. Sorry, 1.5. But it's standard price. My bad. This is 800 by 1. Right, so 840 by 1.5 we saw was 1260. 800 by 1.5 is 1200. So clearly here we spent more than we should have, or we used more than we should have, rather not spent, use more. And that is a $60 unfavorable. All right. Okay, so if you guys are good with the materials variances, the items in the pink, let's give them a quick Genie chat, please, and thanks, right? If you need me to re-explain either or both of them, just give me an R. I'll organize it. Yeah. A little slow today because a bun. 8 hours of class Monday and Wednesday, 6 hours of class Tuesday and Thursday. Yeah. And then not much sleeping. So, not a good idea. Okay, so now we'll tackle the labor variances, right? So the labor, you're going to use these same formulas for the labor variances, right? Labor rate variance is the price variance. The efficiency variance is the quantity variance, right? So for labor, right? So look, labor here, right? So the actual labor is 1.4 hours, right? And it's the same 400 units, right? Right. So if I get 400 units, 400. Right. So you could multiply that by the actual to find the actual number of hours and the standard to see how many hours it should have been. Again, you have your actual price here and your standard price here, so you could organize that. Cool. All right, cool. So you do both the labor rate and the labor efficiency variance, and we go from there, right? How do you go overhead to the next? get a different color and see what we come up with, right? So I'm gonna help you out here in case you're not having such good luck, right? So with the rate variance, again, is the price variance. We're looking at the actual quantity of labor hours by the actual price. That's the actual quantity by actual price, right? But remember, it's 400 units we made at 1.4 hours each, right? So it's not just this by that. You have to multiply these two first and then by that. Yeah. And of course, you compare that to actual quantity by standard price, which would be the $6 as opposed to $6.50, right? Okay, so actual quantity of labor hours is 400 units multiplied by 1.4 hours per unit, which is 560 direct labor hours. Okay, cool. So we're going to take that 560 and multiply by 6.5, my bad, and compare it to 560 by 6. 560 by 6.5, that's 3,360. 640, I think. Let's double check. 560 by 6.5. So 560 by 6.5. 3640, right? So 1 sec. And 560 by 6 is 3,360. Right, so you actually spent more than you should have, but it's just like $80. Okay, cool. Wait, hold on. I see something different across there. My notes from last year. 560. Right, 560. Oh, it's 280. 280. Wow. My bad. Did you erase? Sorry about that, guys. Yeah, a little underslept here, so the brain not thank God for last year's notes, right? Yeah, 280. That's very yeah good. Right now the overhead, the labor efficiency variance. Right, so that's where we take the actual quantity by standard price compared to standard quantity by standard price. So again, the standard price is the same $6 that it would be. But what is this standard quantity? So again, it was supposed to be 1.5 hours per unit, right? So 1.5 per unit by 400, is 600 hours, right? So we're going to use that, right? So the first one is the same 560 multiplied by the right, compared to 600 by 6. Right, so 560 by 6 is the same 3360. 600 by 6 is 3600. Now we actually therefore spend less than we should have. So that's going to give us 240 favorable variance. Okay, right, guys. Can I just get a quick Genie chat if you guys good with the variances, please? If you need to recap it, it's not a problem. Or if you want me to recap it. Okay, thanks. All right, now the overhead variances. Now, look at what they're asking for. The variable overhead spending variance. Now, that kind of makes sense because if you think back to the variances, right? With the spending variance, the fixed overhead didn't change, right? And we really were only comparing the actual variable overhead with the variable overhead that should have been incurred, right? So you're still going to have to kind of break it down. Let me see. Right, but look, they give you just variable overhead stuff here, right? So the variable overhead spending variance, right? Let's see if we could do that real quick. Right, so again, that would be actual quantity, actual price versus actual quantity by standard price, right? And for the overhead efficiency variance, right? So that's where we'll take the actual quantity by standard price and compare it to standard quantity by standard price. Now, what are the quantities, right? The quantity, right, would be the labor. So see 1.5, 1.4, 1.5, 1.4. So we are using the labor hours. So the same figures from here, and I think here would come into play, right? Actual quantity and standard quantity, right? Price, right? Well, they give us the price here, standard and actual, right? So give you a few minutes. Let me see if I can zoom out a little bit so we could just have the variable bits. Right. If that's too small, let me know. So I'll give you a few minutes. Cool. So let's see what happened here now. Right. So variable overhead spending variance, right? So actual quantity of what? Of hours, right? So again, the actual quantity of hours. We have 400 units. 400 by 1.4 will give us 560, right? So we're gonna have 560 by the actual price of 310 versus again actual price actual quantity, sorry, 560 by 3.4. 560 by 3.1, 1736. 560 by 3.4, 1904. Right, 168. Right, so you spent less than you actually, sorry, you actually spent less than you should have. And I have a standard, right? So actual quantity by standard price. Standard, so standard quantity, right? same 400, but now by 1.5. That's 600 hours. So this first thing here will still be the same 560 by 3.4 minus 600, which is again the 400 by the 1.5 by the same 3.4. 3.4, 3.40, same thing, right? Right. That's 1904. 340 by 6, 1800. 2040. Right. Yeah, 2040. 60 and 600. Right, so that's 40 by 36. Not 204 from last year, but that 204 not making sense. 36. Favorable. Mm-hmm. Message them one time. Message them one time. Yeah. Yeah. Hey, Haley. Yeah, no problem. That's all right. We didn't miss too much. All right, guys. Sorry, it's looking a little scrappy than I would like it to look. So I do apologize for that. But if anybody has any questions, now is a good time to ask if, how I get any figures, that kind of stuff. Right? But if you're good, give me a G. If you need me to re-explain anything, give me an R. One, two, three, four. Okay, cool. So there's two more people. So let me know whenever you're ready. Okay, cool. Right. So we're gonna do a question that is actually very, very similar to what we just did. As you can see, they're asking us for material price, material quantity, labor rate, labor efficiency, variable overhead spending, and I will actually add in the variable overhead efficiency variance. Cool. So what I'll do is I'll send the source information in the chat so y'all could use that there. But I'll try to keep it in the visible at all times. All right, let's take a read. Right, so it says ABCR or AB Car Company has the following information available for the current year. Okay. The eraser, like, right, right. So standard. So you have no, no, no. Right, right. So standard, right. So material 3.5 feet per unit at 2.6 per foot. Okay. Labor 5 direct labor hours at 850. Variable overhead, 5 machine hours. Here, our cost driver is actually machine hours, right? Now for the actual, we have 96,000 feet used, 2 per foot. We have 122,400 DLH at 835 per unit, and then we have variable overhead 125,500 machine at 480. If you notice, actual is less than the standard for labor as well as variable overhead. And yeah, the price is actually less for the material than that, right? And this many units were produced. So that's going to inform, right, how many hours, right, based on the standard you were supposed to use. Because you already have the actual. Oh, Jesus. Sorry, my bad. Okay, cool. Ariel, how you doing? Okay. So they want the material price variance and the what you call it, the material quantity variance. So I'll give you guys a couple minutes, and I'll jump into it, right? I'll show you a little shortcut too that might come in a bit handy because yeah, this was a bit scrappy looking. So I mean, it doesn't mean that using the shorter one would be less scrappy. Ashish boy. Okay, so compute the materials price variance. Okay, so let's take a little swing at this, right? So again, it's a price variance. So we have to do actual quantity by actual price, and we're comparing it to actual quantity by standard price. What I was kind of alluding to is that we could actually use factorization. Again, if that's bugging you, just check it. Agree with me that both of them have AQ at the front, right? So you could pull out actual quantity and just compare actual price and standard price in the middle here, right? Now, actual quantity is 96,000 feet. Actual price is that, standard price is that. So basically, we're going to have 96,000 multiplied by 250 with, sorry, 1 second. Yeah, 250 versus 260. Right? So that is going to give us 0.1 in the middle here. 9600 by 0.1 is 9600, and it's favorable. Whoops. So that's a little trick you could use to save some space if that's an issue, right? My gosh. Right. Now for the material quantity variance, we need actual quantity by standard price and standard quantity by standard price. What is the common factor here? Standard price, right? So you could pull out standard price and then compare an actual quantity minus standard quantity. Now, we have the actual quantity. What's the standard quantity? Well, the material standard is 3.5 feet per unit, and we made 25,500 units, right? So standard quantity here would be 25,500 multiplied by 3.5. 89,250, right? Right, so we're gonna have so the standard price is 260. That's gonna be with right 96,000 versus the 89,250. Right, so clearly we spent more than we were supposed to, so we're going to have an unfavorable variance, right? So when you multiply 2.6, right, then it's 17,550. Unfavorable. Right. Okay, so ladies and gents, can I get a quick G in the chat if you guys good with that, please and thanks? If you need me to re-explain any particular aspect of it, that's not a problem. Just let me know. Okay, no problem. All right. Is it that you prefer that if I use the regular expanded version, maybe, or you want to re-explain this version again? Or is it like a specific figure you need me to? This one? Okay, cool. All right. So sometimes the best thing is just to delete everything and get a fresh start. Okay, cool. All right. So there we go. Maybe I could try using a slightly heavier weight in the point because I find maybe that might be better. Right. Okay. So for material price variance, right? So the price variance again is actual quantity by actual price versus actual quantity by standard price. Because again, sorry, not multiply, minus, my bad. Yeah. Again, it's a price variance. So we are looking at the difference between the actual and standard price. Right away, we could see that the actual price was less than the standard price. So we know we're going to have a favorable or positive variance here, right? What we need is the actual quantity. Now, they gave us that already, right? So again, you could do 96,000 by 2.5 here, and then 96,000 by 2.6 here, right? But what I was saying is that the 96,000, right, is the common factor, the actual quantity. So you could factor that out and then just compare actual price and standard price, right? So the actual quantity was 96,000. Actual price was $2.50. Standard price was $2.60, right? Now that's going to give us a 9,600 favorable, right? Because the actual price was less than the standard price. Haley, let's give him a quick G if you're good with that piece. Lovely. Give him a 1 minute. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, that's 23. 23. The angle between tangent and chord is equal to angle in the alternate side. Yeah, okay, good. All right, thanks, Haley. All right, the next piece now is the materials quantity variance. So we're looking at the quantity of materials used. So we actually use 96. The standard would be, well, we take the actual quantity of units, but the standard materials quantity, right? Right. So, actual quantity by standard price versus standard quantity by standard price. So again, you could pull out the standard price as the common factor and you compare an actual quantity to standard quantity, right? Now, for the standard quantity, again, we need to calculate that. So we actually made 25,500 units and the material standard was 3.5 units, 3.5 feet per unit, right? When you multiply that together, I think you get 89 to 50. Let me just double the calculator. Yeah, 89 to 50. Whoops, sorry. Well, if we didn't see before, right? So 89, 250, right? So standard price was 260, right? So that's 2.60, and we compare, and we multiply that by the 96,000, the actual quantity, minus, well, compared to the 89 to 50, which is the standard quantity, right? So 9653, right? And then we're going to multiply that by 2.6. We get 17,550 unfavorable. Right. Yeah, if you give it that one, give me a quick G. If you need me to write in that one as well. Okay, lovely. Thanks very much. Right. So I hope everybody else okay with that too. Again, if you need to go over again, variances is not something I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. I understand how challenging it could be, so if you need me to go over it at all, it's not a problem, right? Okay, cool. I'm missing a couple of people. All right, so now we're doing the labor rate and labor efficiency variance, right? So we're looking at labor now. All right, so there's your labor standard here. There's your actual labor stuff here, right? As you can see, the rate variance would definitely be favorable because you paid less than you budgeted or you plan to, right? And there's your actual labor hours here. So you could work on the rate variance right away just from that alone. Efficiency variance, you'd have to calculate the hours you should have used. But what? United? Okay, okay. variance analysis, standard costing and variance analysis. This is keep a company. That's right here. Zoom out a little bit. Hopefully it's not too small. Oh, so I'm gonna start you off here, right? So again, for the price variance, right, we're comparing actual price, standard price. So again, you could pull out actual quantity because if it was a price variance, you're just comparing the prices, right? Now, the actual quantity of what? Labor, right? The actual price is 835, standard price is 850. Right, so that's 0.15 by 122,400. No. Factorial 8.5 is a what? 18,360. And it's favorable because the actual is less than the standard, right? So 18,360. Okay, I'll give you a minute or two again to sort of the efficiency variance, and then we will correct it, right? And then we have two overhead variances. Let's go. Right, so again, with the labor efficiency variance, we're looking at the number of hours. So we actually use this, but we made this. So we have to multiply these two things to get the standard quantity. And we're comparing it to the standard price. Sorry, we're taking it to the standard price. So again, this one would be actual quantity by standard price minus standard quantity by standard price. So you pull out the standard price as your, what you call it, common factor, and your actual quantity minus standard. Versus standard quantity, right? So your standard price, as we saw above, is 850. Oops, sorry. That's 8.50. Actual quantity was 122,400 as a number of labor hours. All right, and then the standard quantity, that was you made 25,500 units at 5 hours each as the standard, right? So that's gonna give you that's 127.5. Right. So compared to 127.5. So right, 127.5 is definitely more. So you were supposed to take longer than you actually did, or you actually took less time than you were supposed to. So you're gonna have a favorable variance here. All right, so 122,400 minus 127,500. What? Philip. Equals, thank you, multiplied by 850. Sorry. And it's a positive, it's a favorable variance, right? 43,550. All right, okay. Can I get a G in the chat if you guys are good with the variances, please and thanks. If you need me to re-explain, give me an R, let me know, really. We have just we have a little more than 10 minutes left, and we could go a little past 6 if you need me to do so, right? We have the overhead variances now, right? The spending variance and the efficiency variance. Use the same kind of shortcuts above here, right? I probably need to show you all the information. So let's just zoom in here. We'll take out these. Right, variable overhead. You have standard of 5, actual 480. So you could probably use the same kind of format as we just did. Actual is 125.5. Here, I'll multiply this to get standard. Okay, cool. All right. So go ahead. variance again. Right. So the variable overhead spending variance is a spending variance, right? A price variance is actual quantity by actual price minus standard quantity by standard price. So again, the actual quantity, sorry, right? The actual quantity is the common factor, and you're comparing actual price to standard price, right? So the actual quantity is the cost driver. You have 125,500, and you're comparing 480 to $5. Two is 1/5, so you have 25,100 favorable. Right, and then the variable overhead efficiency variance, that's a rate variance. So you have actual quantity by standard price versus standard quantity by standard price. So again, your standard price is the kind of common factor there. So you're comparing actual quantity to standard quantity. Right, so your standard quantity is the number of machine hours you were supposed to use. So you had a standard of 5 machine hours, and we made 25,500 units, right? So 5 hours each by 25,500 is 127, right? So now your standard price, sorry, go back up again. Standard price is 5. So it's that on the outside. Multiply by 125,500 minus 127,500. All right, so that's definitely going to be favorable, and it's 10,000 favorable. No problem. Pardon me? Right. So you see how like the X and Y switch positions. So that means that these are going to be like a 1. Whatever goes to the and whatever went to the back became negative. So the B will be minus 1. So it'll be 0, 1, minus 1, 0. That is, hold on. So 7, 2 is that, and then 2, 2, yeah, that looked like a 90-degree rotation. So from here to here, a clockwise 90 degree. Yeah, clockwise 90 degrees around the origin. All right, so folks, if you guys are good with the variable overhead variance, just kind of give me a quick Genie chat, please and thanks. Yeah, I think we'll call it a day there. So we did a few questions today. We did this one as a bit of a warm-up, and we did these two, right? And we saw we have a bit of a shortcut we could apply here, which will kind of make this working a little less cluttered, right? Okay, so yeah, I have more questions to do on variances, but Unfortunately, we don't have the time to do it. But what I could do is I could just send you guys all of this stuff in the PDF, and you all could look through all of them to your heart's content. Clearly, I didn't do all of them, unfortunately. So we would have to somehow organize that. All right. Anyhow, that's about it for today, guys. Thanks for joining. If anybody has any questions, heading into action in class, please feel free to message me. We meet again on Tuesday when we start investment appraisal, like payback period, ARR, IRR, NPV, that kind of stuff. All right. I'm sorry. Possible collections on make or buy. Then send that already. I sent it to somebody. Material control. I don't have any material control. Material control? What are you talking about? Is that hazardous materials? Material control. I'll see what I have. But yeah, I could send you make or buy for sure. All right. Anyway, guys, I'm making a move there. I'll see you guys next week. Bye.